Every day's a chance you can do something amazing to feel your passion blazing and shine.
Paint with every vision, dance in new directions, explode to new heights in your mind.
I will rise up with you today. Lift up my voice and boldly say, we are the ones we've been waiting for.
Hello, everyone. We are the ones we've been waiting for. Welcome to AGNT Speaks, where we come to you live each week with your AGNT Leadership Council. I am Reverend Erin McCabe, and I am the spiritual leader here at Unity Village Chapel at Unity headquarters in the state of Missouri. And so it is a delight to come to you live. I am here. I am inspired to cultivate consciousness, to activate mindful living, and to provide spiritual nourishment. So it is my delight to be here with you today. We are living in interesting times. So our spiritual practice is even more important than ever. So you're probably feeling that. We are here to support you. We are here to take your questions, to unfold spiritual principles and apply them to the world within us and the world around us. So thank you for being here. If you are watching us live on Facebook or a feed that is being reposted and rehosted, just know that you can go to the event link at any time and you will find information on how to hop into the Zoom room. So if you would like to get up close and personal and come here live in the Zoom room, you can see not only this live portion of the broadcast, but you will get to interact behind the scenes after the broadcast to ask questions, to bring up things that are happening in your mind, in your life, to roll around spiritual principles together with an incredible panel of new thought leaders. So I am delighted today that we have Reverend David, and Reverend David Alexander is coming to us from Spiritual Living Center in Atlanta. So he is an incredible spiritual leader, an incredible man of light, power, and social action. He stands for restorative justice and he stands for consciousness. And for me, he is one of the colleagues that I honor and acknowledge for being so consciously connected in the field with people that are creating action and social action and restorative justice that aligns us with principles. So he is really one of the leaders in the New Thought movement of how do you get these ideas that have prospered so many of us on a personal level into the social stratosphere so that we are activating our consciousness of a world that works for all, and we are going from thinking these things, praying these things, feeling these things, to implementing and activating. And he has an incredible network of amazing spiritual beings living here in this human condition that are committed and dedicated to transforming the world. So I am delighted today to introduce to you and to welcome Reverend David. David, what do you have for us today?
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, Reverend Erin, and hello, AGNT, and all of our friends out there. It's an honor to be with you all this morning. Today, I want to have a conversation or create a conversation starter. I want to share some things that may percolate in your awareness going forward, because I think as this COVID and social unrest, everything that we're moving through continues to drag on much longer than any of us expected or braced ourselves for, but yet continues to persist. It's very much like in our individual spiritual work, right? When a condition that you don't like persists longer than you braced yourself for or prayed about and hoped that it would go away by now, or you thought, oh, okay, I paused and it got my attention and I stopped and I listened, but it's still here, right? You know, when you hit that moment that there's some other work to do, right? Oh, I guess I have to go a little bit deeper, ask some more questions, dive a little deeper. So I've been on a personal process of doing that, diving a little deeper and engaging my spiritual community and doing the same. And one of the ways we're doing that is we're going to be starting a summer book series next month on creating a world that works for all by Sharif Abdullah. this is the book that almost 20 years ago really got me started on this journey, right? I belong to a movement called Centers for Spiritual Living, which had this as their vision, creating a world that works for everyone. And I was like, where did they get that? And I went to a convention. First year my ministry started in 2004, and Sharif Abdullah was the speaker, and the theme of the conference was creating a world that works for everyone. And then that's his book and his work. And he's actually based, his institute, Common Way Institute, is based out of Portland. And so we became fast friends, and it became one of my early contacts in that vast network, Erin, that you referenced. Very blessed to have sat down with him many, many times and discussed this work and what we can do. And so I went back to it, and I'm inviting my community to dive into it as kind of a ground floor of understanding where we are and how we can move forward. And so I want to share some things out of it that I think will be powerful conversation starters for us. In the second chapter of what he defines is called the nightmare, and he defines the social mess, right? And he kind of goes through and labels all the conditions and the things that we could just generally call the mess, and you could imagine what they are. And then he says, well, what is at the source? We're all trying to figure out, where does this mess come from? And his answer to that is that we are a spiritually starved society, that there's a soul starvation at the core of what we're experiencing. And he says, we are powerful spiritual beings living in a system that robs us of our power. We are sacred creatures in a desecrated land. We are not only hemmed in, we hem in each other. It's no wonder that we act crazy. We are starved, and we live in a society that starves our soul. And so he goes on to talk about that. He says, part of your spiritual starvation lies in being unreconciled to what you really are, right? To your spiritual truth. But what I want to focus on is he talks about then what are the symptoms of a spiritually starved society, both at individual behavior and collectively. So there are 4 symptoms that he mentions. The first is anger and violence. That we, again, if we're unreconciled to who we are, we act out in anger and violence. And he goes in to talk about how very often in a world that keeps us otherwise very busy, we internalize that anger and violence. So that might show up as not taking care of ourselves. That might show up as having self-defeating thoughts. It might show up as bulimia or anorexia or other, mental conditions and manifestations that are showing up in that way. The second symptom is escapist behavior. And we have a whole range of escapist behavior, from, a good series on Netflix to drugs and alcohol to sex addiction, or, a whole range of things that we might consider the scale of acceptable or not acceptable socially or otherwise. But we all kind of, which leads to the third. So escapist behavior, and then there's a bit of a nuance on that. The third symptom is denial and numbing. Very often our escapist behavior leads to and feeds our desire to just numb out and to deny that there's anything wrong. Right. There's nothing. I got to get up and beat traffic tomorrow and get to work. And there's I'm just numbed out. I'm denying it. There's nothing wrong. And then finally, the last one is control and manipulation. And we seek to control the narrative and manipulate. And so what I'm seeing is that those 4 things are being challenged in a really dynamic way. The first of which is all of our socially acceptable forms of escapist behavior were kind of pulled out from under us when this whole thing started. Right? The the driving in traffic and just tuning out to our music or podcasts or whatever, the just being too busy to pay attention to what's going on social media or the news or how outraged people are or what the underlying conditions are, and all of those, even things that I like, right? I'm looking forward to baseball coming back. I want to sit down and tune into a baseball game. Nothing wrong with doing that, but it can be a form of escapist behavior where it's like I don't have to check in on how is the world working right now if I can just numb out instead. So there's a certain level of that's acceptable in terms of self-regulation, and then there's the overuse of that behavior that it becomes an addictive pattern in a soul-starved society. So what I've noticed is as escapist behaviors have been taken away, then it has pushed our anxiety to those other forms, right? Anger and violence has increased. The denial and numbing has increased, and the control and manipulation is like really high, right? We're really, I've just been shocked at all of these conspiracy theories that are coming out, even from some of my spiritually minded friends that are just suddenly really into some interesting conspiracy theories. Because to me, a conspiracy theory is an indication of a mind that is unwilling or unable to deal with the reality that's right in front of them. And so it's kind of no surprise that there's an increase of conspiracy theories, because it's like our mind, we haven't trained ourselves to be equipped to handle what's happening. So we have to have some reason. Well, it must be the cell towers. It must be this. It must be so-and-so and so-and-so who's connected to so-and-so. And it's all a big map of, and because that really is a form of escapist denial and numbing out. So what I have is just some mindfulness about that. And then to just pause and go, in what ways am I doing that, right? And I've already self-identified, like baseball is an escapism for me, for sure. And I'm looking forward to it coming back, not so that I can run away, but so that I can have a mental break. Again, mental health is very important, but how we regulate these behaviors and mental activities is very important. And then how do we begin to fill ourselves up? So that, remember in the beginning, it said, so much of our soul-starved status is from not being reconciled to who and what we really are. So where do I go to get that part of me filled up? Who am I really? If you take away all the anxiety and all the political identity and polarization and everything else, who am I really at the core? And what am I doing to fill that part of myself up? Which is why I think what spiritual communities are doing online to reach out to people and feed people at this time is so very, very important. So those are my thoughts and reflections. I'm sure it can stir and create lots of dialogue in our after conversation and beyond that. So I invite you to think on those things and pray about them.
Thank you, David. That really gives us a lot to sit with, to look at for all of us. Like, look at those behaviors, look at what's going on in our mind, and look at what we do when we feel like we can't control something, when we feel like we need to know an answer or need to know what to expect, and we are in a continual flow of the unexpected. We are in a continual flow of this sensation that we can't control this or get answers. Like, I've noticed even with spiritual community, like the temptation to, put a random date out there that we'll be starting by, when the truth is we don't have answers. So it's like, okay, what is that in me that wants to just pick a time or pick a date or go against the principles? Like, for my example that our board has set, we're looking at certain parameters, and one of the commitments is a decline. And when we see that, we will look at, opening to the physical again. And then all of our hearts just going like, well, but could we, and arguing that. So it's like,
in the park, can't we? Yeah. Dealing with anxiety, that anxiety, and learning to, when this is kind of a whole another topic we could dive into, but when you really get your mind around what you can control and what you can't control. The list on can't control can get really big really quickly, right? Because what we really have control of is our mindset, right? How we think about even the things we can't control. I had a complete meltdown and breakdown a few weeks ago around that when I was dealing with somebody was asking about, well, what is the conversation you have with your sons, with my sons who are Black? You know, tell me about that experience of being a father who has to have, you know, the conversation. And I just I answered the thing in the interview, but afterwards I had a complete breakdown because I realized that the conversation is completely and utterly inadequate, right? The conversation used to be, do this and this and this. If you're stopped, if you're, you know, stay out of this, you know, if your friends are causing trouble, you know, even if you're not the one doing it, but you're hanging out with them, you're going to become the target if cops roll up on the scene. They're going to, you know, all of these sort of precautionary, you know, tips and tools and tricks. But we have now evidence of people who have young Black men who have been behaving and cooperating and doing everything right, and they end up in the exact same place as the one who turns and runs and tries to escape. And so I was overwhelmed with this sense of I cannot control the ways in which the world will seek to harm my children simply for the color of their skin. I cannot control that. Once they leave the door of this house, I can prepare them, I can pray, I can do my spiritual practice. So when we really get clear about what we don't have control over, it can be extremely anxiety producing.
Yes.
And so we have to find that spiritually starved part of ourselves. We have to find a way to fill that up, because faith and spiritual practice and spiritual nurturing of something greater than us that holds all of this together is really the only way to cope with that level of anxiety.
Yeah. And that's so right on, because noticing that helps you, helps me, helps everyone out there be mindful that if we don't metabolize that energy, that feeling, that conversation, that consciousness, that awareness, if we don't metabolize it in a healthy way, then it will go into what you said, the anger, increased denial and numbing out, increased control, manipulation, increased escapism behavior. You know, that if we can't be with that extreme discomfort and that really just that devastating awareness, then we can't support ourselves spiritually, and we can't support each other spiritually. We can't support our children spiritually. Thank you, Reverend David. Let's hop into the Zoom room right now. We're going to be able to unpack this discussion, take it deeper, find out what's on the hearts of everyone in our Zoom room. Remember that
to show the book again. So there it is again, Creating a World That Works for All by Sharif Abdullah. And it came out in 1999, but still incredibly relevant and really one of the bedrock pieces for me in developing all of this stuff on top of it.
Yes, and he's still doing a lot of current work. So he has groups getting together. He has practices and activities that you can engage in either by yourself or with other community members. So go ahead and take some time to look that up online. So go ahead and hop in live to the Zoom room. And if you want to find more about our work with AGNT or look at your leadership council and see what everyone's doing as far as Zoom offerings and Sunday services, feel free to hop on. You can find links on the event page. So where you found this event, all of those links are there. So you can donate and contribute to the spiritual nourishment that is AGNT and keep this community thriving, keep this conversation thriving. If you appreciate it and it is a source of spiritual nourishment for you, you can find out more about your leaders. You can find out about a spiritual center near you. So we're honored to be with you to have this conversation, and let's hop into the Zoom room. We'll see you next week for AGNT Speaks.
What we know about our teaching in New Thought is that we know how to change consciousness. And we know that changing consciousness changes everything. And I think as we look at, and we're doing many, many other things, but what I want to talk about is what you have the spirit of, what Reverend Kevin and Reverend Wendy, and I think all the leaders in AGNT and many people in our community, I think what we need to remind ourselves of is what we're seeing, what you all are seeing here, is what Dr. Martin Luther King called prophetic zeal. The church without prophetic zeal, he warned us of this. He said the church without prophetic zeal becomes an isolated social club. But the church with prophetic zeal becomes the moral compass, and is not the slave of the state or the tool of the state, but is the conscience of the state. We need to claim the prophetic zeal of oneness. And when you claim the prophetic zeal of oneness, it means you have to look at all of the things that have been manifested out of the dark cracks of separation. Racism, discrimination, economic injustice, environmental degradation, all of these things. You have to look at those things and speak to it a prophetic zeal that says that is not the truth. But just like Reverend Lola was speaking about, when we do that, you don't just say that's not the truth and keep eating Cheetos. You change your behavior. You say, I'm healthy and whole, and you make new decisions, and you heal the fractures, you heal the broken places by changing behavior. You start with the consciousness, but then you move into action, and that's what we're called to do in this moment. And I see you doing it in Albuquerque. I know we're doing our part in Portland. I know Rev Kev is doing his part in Sacramento. Wendy is doing her part in San Diego, and we're asking all of you to join us and to make us bolder together and do your part where you are.
All right, everyone, welcome to the Zoom room.